be friends.
Have you not?
And here we go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, geeks and nerds and ambassadors everywhere, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing. Hope y'all are having a wonderful Friday night. Hope you all are ready for another restful, hopefully for many of you, weekend. And glad to be back here with all of you tonight, whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitter. And tonight, we return to one of my favorite decades, the 1990s. And over the next few weeks, well, let's just say welcome to the disaster zone. Because over the next 2 weeks, we are going to be revisiting the disaster movies of the 1990s. And that tonight, we kick the whole party off with two of my personal favorites, Armageddon and Deep Impact. But a few things before we get into the discussion this evening. If this is your first visit to the Ambassadorial Wing, welcome one and all. I hope you enjoy the stream tonight. Hope you all enjoyed the discussion. And here shortly, I will be dropping the link in the chat if you all want to join me this evening for the discussion. If you have had a chance to watch Armageddon and Deep Impact, or if you just happen to remember the movies off the top of your head. But make sure you drill that like button. Make sure that you share this out with all of your friends who are fans of disaster movies from the 1990s. And I just realized I spelled disaster zone wrong. So I better correct that. Just 1 minute. Oh, it's been one of those days. Yeah, it's already a disaster zone. I misspelled. There we go. DISAT. There we go. S. Okay, there we go. That's better. Oh dear Lord, it's been a hell of a day. But and good evening to my good friend. Haven't seen him in a little bit, Mr. Tim's talk of Deep Impact. That's what she said. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, my friend. I needed that. And you know what? I'm not going to wait or anything. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat for any of you that are watching on YouTube. Or if you're watching this on Twitter, if you want me to send you the link, just put a comment in the chat and I will be more than happy to send you the link, and you can come in here tonight and you can share cheesy one-liners. Just like this one. All right, 1 second, guys and girls. Stream link. There we go. All right, and paste and enter, and then we'll pin it. Oh goodness, Tim. You have no idea how much I needed that joke, so thank you, Tim, very, very much. And I hope you're having a good night, buddy. But as I was saying before this stream got ever so slightly derailed, tonight we're revisiting the disaster films of the 1990s, and tonight we are discussing Armageddon and Deep Impact, and then in a week or so we're going to be talking about Dante's Peak and Volcano, and then to wrap up, lastly we will be discussing. Yes, I know it is cringy. Yes, I know it is cheesy, but it is a personal favorite of mine, Twister. But to give a little context, for those of you who may be too young to remember, disaster movies have a long history in the entertainment industry. Then it goes all the way back, starting all the way back in like the 1960s and 1970s. Disaster movies are nothing new for Hollywood. But in the 1990s, we got a brand new piece of technology that allowed us to realize and maybe do disaster movies in a brand new way and present new disasters that we could never have done in the past. I mean, just to name a few from the 1960s and 70s, I mean, you had The Towering Inferno, you had all of the airport movies where, whether it was a hijacking or it was some sort of sickness or whatever the case may be, a stewardess or a random passenger from the plane had to land the plane, and it was all dire and scary and heart stopping. There's the Poseidon adventure. Hollywood came up with some really creative disaster movies back in the day. And then, like I said, with the advent of CGI technology, they're like, hey, we can figure out all sorts of new ways to put the world in peril. Okay, and there's one other movie I have to mention. That is, of course, Earthquake, which, granted, it by no means stands up to what we can do nowadays with a disaster movie, but Earthquake, which I think came out in like the 60s or the 70s, another great example of a disaster movie that's rather noteworthy. And each of these movies that we'll be discussing over the next few weeks are noteworthy in their own ways. Tonight we're talking asteroids and comets. And of course, Armageddon is an asteroid, Deep Impact is a comet. And no, it's not Halley's Comet, it's the Wolf Biederman comet, discovered by Mr. Frodo Baggins himself, Elijah Wood. And of course, you've got Armageddon, where the asteroid is first discovered by um, NASA, uh, and then of course a amateur astronomer and everything, a cranky old man named Earl, who has a very temperamental wife, and he's sitting in his his telescope observatory, and he notices that the a space shuttle has been um, blown up by a bunch of meteors. But these movies and everything, yes, these are both movies I went and saw back in the day with Mother and Bastard. Yes, these are movies that we both enjoyed because Mother and Bastard remembers the old disaster movies, and we watched the old disaster movies from the 1960s and 70s as I was growing up. And to say we enjoyed these movies is an understatement. And yes, regardless of how many times I have watched these movies, I still enjoy them. Yes, I know that somehow or another humanity survives, that the hero saved the day, that somebody makes a noble sacrifice, or whatever the case. And tonight we'll be discussing all of that. We'll be talking about the parts of these movies that we love. We talk about the movies that we feel are rather cringeworthy, which is justifiable because these are movies of the 1990s. And yes, they are disaster movies from the 1990s. But all the same, these movies are a part of the 90s landscape that should not be ignored. At least as far as I am concerned. For me, these two movies, Deep Impact and Armageddon, they are an absolute delight of cinema because they don't take themselves overly seriously, or they understand exactly what they are. And you've got one movie, Armageddon, directed by Michael Bay. You've got another one, the other one, Deep Impact, directed by Mimi Leader. And we all know Michael Bay. We all know what he's famous for, and that's of course the Transformers movies. And love them or hate them, I have mixed feelings about the Transformers movies. The first one I really enjoyed. After the third one, I kind of, well, Ace, there's nothing to apologize on that point. You work at a comic book store. I'm kind of jealous. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I worked at a comic book store. I work at McDonald's.
I got my proof right here. I got my Coke.
But Ace, good to see you nonetheless, buddy. Besides, Ace, don't feel bad. I was running late anyhow. But anyway, I think the thing that I appreciate about not just these two movies that we'll be discussing tonight, but all of the disaster movies of the 1990s is they are a safe, cathartic way to see the world come to the edge of destruction. Oh, hey, dude, I don't care. A comic book store is a comic book store. Comics are awesome, always will be. And if you want to think about it, disaster movies have almost as long a run in cinema as well superhero movies do now, to kind of tie into what you brought up, Ace. But the thing I appreciate about disaster movies is they're kind of cathartic. And even though you may have watched them a million times over, if you've had a crummy day at work and you want to come home and you want to watch something that just is relaxing to a degree, and something you can where if you've had a coworker or a customer that's really just cheesed you off, you can watch these movies and you can put that coworker or put that customer in one of those spots where somebody gets smushed or somebody gets blowed up or somebody gets hit by an asteroid or a comet or gets sucked up by a twister or somebody who gets melted by a volcano. And it's deeply, deeply satisfying. It really is. It is deeply, deeply satisfying. And to kind of get into the movies themselves. And we'll start with Armageddon. Well, actually, I want to make a couple more comments and everything before I get into this movie specifically. It's been a long time since I have watched Deep Impact. I'm not gonna lie to you. I have probably watched Armageddon more often than I have watched Deep Impact. But I will say this. There is a stark difference in tone and how the story is presented in Deep Impact than what is presented in Armageddon. Now, obviously, that does lend itself to the cast, but it also lends itself to the director and the writer and so on. I mean, you got Mimi Leader, who is a more cerebral director, whereas Michael Bay, well, as I mentioned, we all know what Michael Bay does. We all know Michael Bay's directing style. But I have to admit, there was something about Deep Impact that I appreciated just a little bit more compared to Armageddon. And I think it is that we didn't spend as much time with the astronauts or the drillers in um, Deep Impact than what we did in Armageddon. And there was nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that, but I have to admit, I did like the difference in tone between the two movies. Because here's the thing, these two movies came out, I think, maybe a year or two apart from each other. And while Armageddon, I think, is remembered a little bit more because of the cast and a lot of the quotes and everything from that movie, there's a lot of good in Deep Impact as well. And anything, I mean, we'll just just to make a few notes or anything, mention a few noteworthy cast members from Deep Impact. I mean, obviously, okay, we might do this is who had the better what? In Deep Impact, I think you definitely had the better president because in Deep Impact, you had Morgan Freeman. In Armageddon, you had a wrinkly old dude. In Deep Impact, you had Robert Duvall, Jon Favreau, Blair Underwood, and a couple other fairly noteworthy actors and everything as the astronaut team and everything. In Armageddon, okay, you got Bruce Willis, you got Ben Affleck, you got oh, for heaven's sakes, Michael Clark Duncan. You've got Owen Wilson. Now, granted, Owen Wilson isn't in the movie for that very long. You have Steve Buscemi, Rockhound. We call him Hound because, well, he's horny. You have Liv Tyler. Well, granted, she is not a astronaut or a driller. She is Bruce. She does play Bruce Willis's daughter. Oh, for heaven's sakes, I forgot her name. Well, we'll refer to her by her real name, Liv Tyler. You've got Billy Bob Thornton, and you've got just an absolute wonderful. Oh, okay, damn it, I can't remember the name of the actor, but the actor who played Colonel Willie Sharp. He played the bank manager in The Dark Knight, the one that the Joker ended up shooting. And as much as I enjoy Armageddon, and I think the thing I like best about it is, as much as the cast is a lot more memorable from Armageddon, and let's look at the cast from Deep Impact. Like I mentioned, you got Robert Duvall, you had Jon Favreau in one of his earliest roles. You got Morgan Freeman as the president. You got Elijah Wood. You got Lily Sobieski. You got Richard Schiff as Elijah Wood's character's dad. You got Denise Crosby from Star Trek: The Next Generation. What's her name? Oh, she played Dr. Weaver on ER. I can't remember the name of the actress off the top of my head. It's not Moira Tierney, because I have a crush on Moira Tierney. Damn it. Anyway, you had the actress who played Dr. Weaver on ER. But the thing I appreciate about Deep Impact after watching it after a very long absence from doing so, it focuses more. Oh, okay, and three more actors actually. Tia Leone, Vanessa Redgrave, and this is the guy I had not seen in a movie since the 1970s. Granted, I wasn't alive when the movie that he was in came out. Or no, 1980, if I remember correctly. Maximilian Schell or anything as Tia Leone's father. For those of you who may not remember, Maximilian Schell was in I think has become a very well-regarded cult classic from the old Disney vault, and that's, of course, The Black Hole, where he played Dr. Hans Reinhardt. And I had not seen him in anything, and I was like, wait a minute. I know him. That's the somewhat evil, somewhat demented doctor from Black Hole. And the Deep Impact, I think, had the more heavy hitter, more serious cast and more serious tone, whereas Armageddon, it didn't take itself overly seriously. It still had a somewhat more comedic tone to it, but at the same time, it did have its serious moments as well. Whereas, excuse me, Deep Impact had the more serious tone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I didn't want both movies to be exactly the same, because, well, it would have been boring. I mean, if you just change what it is it's trying to hit the Earth, it's going to be boring. It's going to be dull. But I think what Deep Impact presents is a more down to earth and somewhat more realistic scenario, because you spend more time with the people down on Earth rather than spending more time with the astronauts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it gives you an opportunity to look at how people would react in a situation like this. And I think that's one of the strengths of Deep Impact. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not bashing either one of these movies. These are both, in my opinion, very entertaining movies, very thought-provoking movies, and everything, especially Deep Impact. Because if you look at how the scenario is set up, I mean, first they're going to try and blow up the comet, which we kind of know how that turns out. It doesn't exactly work, but at the same time, it does work. But it ends with a what I would call a heroic sacrifice on the part of the crew of astronauts and everything, who turn their ship into one giant nuke essentially and fly it into the comet and destroy it. But you do have the stakes of the other smaller fragment of the comet that's still going to hit Earth. And you see how people react. You see how people are dealing with the situation. Because once they find out that there's going to be a lottery that's going to be based on everybody's social security number, but also their age, it becomes very heavy. Anything. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I will get to Armageddon in due course or anything, but I kind of want to parallel these two movies because I think that's the best way to kind of discuss them rather than just going scene by scene. Because honestly, I'm not being a nitpick and I'm not trying to bash anybody or anything, but I feel like a scene by scene breakdown gets a little monotonous, a little tedious at times. And again, everybody has their style about reviewing movies. So, okay. And off that digression. What we have in Deep Impact is a more human based story rather than more of a caricature. Because if you look at the different characters and everything in Armageddon, you could imagine that maybe some of these people would exist in real life, but they're almost like caricatures. They're a little too beyond suspension of disbelief, but not so far that it's unbelievable. But with Deep Impact, all these characters, Elijah Wood's character, Lily Sobieski, the astronauts crew, even the president, Morgan Freeman and everything playing the president, they all feel believable. They all feel like they are grounded in a certain degree of reality. And honestly, for me, that was one of the strengths of Deep Impact. There is humor, but it's not as slapsticky. If that makes no, that would make sense. Whereas the humor in Armageddon is a bit more slapstick. So, and do want to say hello to the chat. Another good friend, everything popping in from across the pond, Mountains of Elysium. Appreciate you stopping in, bud, and hope you're having a good night, and hope you have a good weekend, buddy. And if you get a chance, knock back a pint for me, bud, and give my best to the family. So, but just one example. When the lottery is announced and Tia Leone's mother finds out that she's not going to be eligible because she's over the age of 50, she starts giving away all her prized antiques. She starts turning her, as she says to her daughter, "My apartment's practically Japanese." But then we have a somewhat poetic, but also a very sad scene where she gets herself all dressed up and gets herself and everything all done up with her makeup and everything. And then we don't see it on screen, but she takes her life because she feels anything that it would be better for her to go that way rather than die if the comet does hit Earth. And, to kind of give some context, what exactly is with the lottery? For those of you who may not remember, there's a lottery and everything because they were working. The plan was twofold. They were building the ship and everything to try and go and destroy the comet, or at least divert it off course. But they were also building all of these deep underground shelters so that humanity would survive and everything if the comet did hit Earth. and everything, and they had people in there, they had animals in there, they were um, saving artwork and antiques and everything. They had scientists and engineers and artists and obviously, politicians and so on and everything to survive the cataclysm should the worst happen. And what you see and everything is how people would deal with that whole situation. Some people deal with it rather civilly and anything. There's not a lot of at first there's not a lot of widespread looting or lawlessness or anything, but as time goes on, stuff starts to break down. And I remember one comment from Morgan Freeman's character, the president, and I think when he's making his address to the nation about what's going on with the ship and with the underground shelters and so on. He's like, a bottle of water will cost you just as much tomorrow as it does today. You all will still go to work. You will all still pay your bills. He's like, any crime that's committed will be dealt with swiftly and harshly, which means no long drawn out court cases or anything because, well, quite frankly, they got more important things to worry about, trying to preserve humanity. And he talks about, well, the other nations of the world and everything are doing in regards to their survival plans and everything. And we don't necessarily see what the other countries are doing, but at the same time, that's not necessarily necessary. But there's one particular instance and everything, and it involves Elijah Wood's character, Leo Biederman, and him and this the other girl and everything, who the girl that he's sweet on, Lily Sobieski's character, and he's like, you can tell he cares about her. He cares. You can tell that he loves her, and he's like, we could get married, and that way you could make it in, and we could probably get your parents in as well. Unfortunately, when the transports come to collect everybody that's going to the shelters, doesn't work out that way. And instead of just going into the shelter with his mom and dad, and I think it's his little brother or little sister. I can't. Oh, sister. Okay. Thank you, honey. He's like, I gotta go back and get her, and I think we could each put ourselves in that same situation and say, would I do the same thing for someone that I loved intensely? Yeah, I think we all would, even if we don't make it, I would rather go that extra mile to rescue the one I love, or at least be with the one that I love before the end, if anything, well, so seemingly the end of the world. And it's a really touching scene and everything, because he finally does get back to Sobieski's character and her family, and her mom and dad and everything are like, look, you've got to go. You've got to run. You've got to survive. And she's like, I don't want to leave you. And her mom and dad are like, look, take your younger sibling and go. And everything, it's just an infant and everything. It's her infant sibling. I can't remember. I think it's a boy and everything. Take your baby brother and run. And they end up doing so, and they end up making it. But I think there's another very emotionally intense moment in Deep Impact, and it's Tia Leone's character, and she's been estranged from her father for many years because her mom and dad divorced. And and her father ends up remarrying a younger woman who's, if I remember correctly, 2 years younger, or 2 years younger, or 2 years older than she is. And it's towards the end of everything, when the smaller part of the comet's going to impact with Earth, and he tries to reach her. He tries to reach out to her and say, look, because there's a moment and everything before this where she's sitting Yeah, Elysium, I'm the same way, bud. I am absolutely the same way. I don't think many people could just leave behind someone they care about and just not even try. But she's sitting in the rain after going to take care of, identifying her mother's body after her mother takes her own life. And she's sitting there in the pouring down rain, and her father finally tracks her down, and she's like, "You know what? I feel like an orphan." And she calls a cab, and she just drives and everything, and they just drive away and just leave her father staying there in the rain. It's a few days, or it's the day of when when the first part of the comet's going to impact Earth, and he comes to the news station where she works at, and I think because she was working at, I think if I remember correctly, it's an affiliate of MSNBC and everything, or maybe it's NBC, MSNBC, back before they went a little. But he comes to the office building, and he shows her a couple of pictures that mother took of her and him. And he's like, "I want to show you that you are not an orphan." And what ends up happening is she gives up her seat to save one of her other coworkers and her young daughter, and she ends up driving to the beach and everything where her father's at. And she confesses that when she was like a teenager or something, she stole like $30 from his wallet. And he says, "I don't care." And there's this it's a very emotional scene where they're standing there and you can see the tidal wave building and them just being there on the beach all by themselves. And the wave finally crashes in and everything, and you don't see it crash in on them. And I think that was actually a good move, but you understand that they died together, father and daughter. And I thought that honestly was a really good move and everything on the part of Mimi Leader to show us that resolution, even though they were estranged. Taya Leone's character finally said, "Okay, I want to be with my dad and everything. If I'm going to go, I want to be with my father and everything. I want us to be together when we die." And I thought that was actually, while it was a very sad moment, it was a very touching moment as well. They don't say a whole lot to each other. They just stand there and they wait for the inevitable. And on the other side of things, you've got Elijah Wood and Lily Sobieski on a dirt bike, running for their lives until they can't ride the dirt bike anymore, and they just start climbing this hill or anything, this very high hill, and they feel like, okay, you feel like maybe they're gonna die as well, but they end up surviving. But I think that's one of the strengths of Deep Impact, to be honest with you. So, okay, I'll bring up your comment here. I made a bad joke about the moment when Taylor only went to see her father just before impact. She arrives to the beach house and finds a note: "Gone to higher ground, no milk for 2 weeks, please." Oh, Elysium, dude. Dude. Seriously. Elysium, you're killing me here. I don't know who's worse, you or Tim. But honestly, I have to freely admit, where Armageddon has the more slapstick humor and maybe the little more over the top story and maybe a little bit more overacting, everything in Deep Impact feels more grounded in reality to a degree. And that's the I think one of the things I really enjoyed about rewatching this a few days ago. And it was a real treat and everything. I hadn't seen, like I mentioned, I hadn't seen Deep Impact in hmm, years, literally. Whereas I've watched Armageddon off and on at least once a year within the last 3 to 4 years. So Armageddon's a lot more fresh in my mind than Deep Impact was. So uh, it was kind of a nice change and everything to revisit a movie I hadn't seen probably since me and Mother Ambassador rented it from like from um, Blockbuster or Family Video. And I will tell you all something, and I do not say this with a drop of shame. Even to this day, Mother Ambassador still has a copy of Armageddon on VHS. And I asked her, I was like, do you ever want us to transfer all these movies to DVD? She's like, if you ever want to, you can. And she's like, I'm just as happy with it because I've still got a VCR that more often than not still works. I'm like, okay, we'll leave that alone. But, to kind of we'll put a pin in Deep Impact for now. We'll transition over to Armageddon. Now, Armageddon, it starts off with a bang. To quote one of my favorite movies, also another favorite movie from the 1990s, let's start this party with a bang. Of course, that's from Batman Forever, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. And I know if my friend Zach Larry was here, he would be like, ugh, I hate that movie. And Zach, if you see this on the replay, buddy, well, as much as you hate Batman Forever, you know where I stand on Batman and Robin. But anyway, Armageddon, there are serious moments in Armageddon. That is not at dispute here, but at the same time, when you have a cast like is presented in Armageddon, you have a lot more opportunity for both serious moments and for somewhat comedic moments or just straight out comedic moments. I mean, when you got a character named Rockhound played by Steve Buscemi, who is, well, to quote Liv Tyler's character, Grace. That's the name of. Grace, that's the name of Liv Tyler's character. And she refers to her father by her first name, Harry. I found Armageddon such a fun movie, so over the top, it completes 7 orbits of the planet. Oh, goodness. But Grace, that's the name of Liv Tyler's character. Anyway, and you've got her in a relationship with Ben Affleck's character, AJ Frost. And the cast for Armageddon is so dang, memorable. And then there are so many great moments. Okay. I don't remember the name of the actor who played Max, the heavy set driller and everything that was part of Harry's crew. But he's sitting there in a tattoo parlor getting a tattoo that says "Love and Mama," and his mom comes in and she's like, "Oh, Maxie, that's so sweet," and she brings that box of donuts and she's like, "Are you in trouble with the law?" He's like, "No, Mama, no way," and she's like, "Maxie, don't lie to me." And then they pan back, and there are 2 FBI agents waiting not to take him into custody, but to collect him so that they can take him to Houston. Okay, and before I go any further, I want to share kind of a funny story. Okay, it is a funny story, period. This was many years ago when me and Matt Ambassador first started dating. We weren't married yet or anything, but we were dating. And I had been planning a trip down to Texas to visit my aunt and uncle and my cousins and everything. This was my dad's sister and her family and everything, who I had seen maybe once or twice when I was young and who I had seen just a few years before this or anything. Back in 2012, my aunt and uncle came up to visit me and Mother Ambassador. And we spent a week with them and everything. And we stayed at their house because they wouldn't let us stay at a hotel. They weren't going to let their favorite nephew and everything stay at a hotel. But we everything they live in Bryant College Station, which is the home location of Texas A&M, and my aunt at the time and one of my older cousins or anything. Well, she's not older than me by a whole lot, but she's the eldest of all cousins and everything of all the kids that my aunt and uncle had. We went to Texas A&M, took a tour of the whole campus, but we ended up going to NASA. Ended up going to the Space Center there. Except we made one tiny little problem or mistake. We didn't drive to the civilian entrance. We ended up driving to the private military entrance. And as we started pulling up, I was looking to my left, and as was Madam Ambassador. And I looked at her, I was like, I think we're in the wrong pew. And she's like, I think you're right. And we got up to the gate, and here came this MP, and I was like, excuse me, I think we're lost. He's like, are you wanting the other entrance? And I was like, yeah, we are. He's like, you'd be amazed how often this happens. And he's like, just turn around, go back down, and go up the other street, and it'll take you right there. And we're like, okay, thank you. And I just asked him and everything. I was like, how often does this happen? And he's like, at least 2 or 3 times a week, if not more. So we did kind of go to where Harry and the rest of the crew went to themselves, just by accident. But we did get to see all the rockets and the command center where where all the Apollo missions and the Mercury missions were commanded from, essentially. And I hope this will not get me in trouble, just in case anybody from the Houston Space Center is watching this. As we were touring the place and everything, they have all the rockets and everything from the Apollo missions, at least the ones that they were able to save. And I wasn't supposed to do this, but I actually got to touch one of the Saturn rockets that took one of the Apollo missions into space. And I can say that that was probably amongst one of my favorite moments from that trip.
It wasn't against the rules. I took a picture, remember? That rooster affected your brain.
For those who might be wondering, that was Madam Ambassador. She'll actually be joining me here in a couple weeks when we discuss Dante's Peak and Volcano. But, okay, obviously it wasn't against the rules, but regardless. But getting back to the movie itself, you have as I mentioned earlier on, kind of a caricature of what these oil drillers would actually behave like. Elysium, really? We didn't get that far in. I know you're joking, Elysium, obviously. But dude, what the heck? Elysium asked, did you see any of the captured alien spaceships at the military entrance? Oh, Elysium, you're killing me here, man. Oh, you're a mess, dude. But you're my friend, so you're my mess, and I love you. Not more so than your wife, but I love you, man. But it's honestly it's comical because you look at this group of miners or oil drillers, and you think to yourself, do people As I'm listening, I'm reading a comic from the comic equivalent of Michael Bay. Take a wild guess who. Ace, I have the fall guess, so you're just going to have to tell me, bud. I really don't know. But, okay. Yeah, Elysium, it is. It very much is. And yeah, as Madam Ambassador mentioned, she took a picture of me doing it, so I guess it wasn't Rob Liefeld. No offense, Ace, but I don't necessarily recognize that name. And I don't say that to be mean or anything, but I legitimately do not remember who that is, to be honest with you. But, okay. If I was to list who members of the mining crew are, and this is gonna oh, well, I just know who the characters are. I don't really keep track of who creates them. Ace, no offense. Or anything. Obviously, no offense. You wouldn't take offense. But okay, cool. Makes sense with Deadpool, especially. Not so much with Cable, but definitely with Deadpool. But okay. If I were to pick who I'd want to hang out with and maybe have a drink or whatever, or who I want to just have as a good friend, probably no. Harry's a bit of a hard ass, so no, definitely not Harry. Probably okay, probably Rockhound, because you couldn't have a better wingman. Not that, well, if I was single, let's put it that way. Probably Michael Clark Duncan's character Bear, because you won't have that guy in your corner if you get into a tussle. That's for damn sure. Probably Ben Affleck's character AJ, and one other guy, the Russian cosmonaut, Lev. I can't remember, but played by Pierre Stormare. Or anything. For those of you who might not know him or anything, or who might recognize him, he was also in the Constantine movie with Keanu Reeves. He plays Satan. Another great fictional interpretation of Satan. Oh, wow. Elysium, that's cool. I did something similar at the West Point Museum. They had the casting for the third nuclear bomb built during World War II for use after Hiroshima. When no one was looking, I had to touch history. I won't tell if you won't, Elysium. Dude, that's cool. And speaking of that particular event or anything, I don't know if any of you are aware, but in like a week or two, I imagine another masterpiece by Mr. Christopher Nolan's going to be coming out in theaters. That, of course, being Oppenheimer. I'm not going to lie, that's a movie I had heard about back last year, or maybe it was the year before, and I was like, ooh, this is about the Manhattan Project. The creation of the atomic bomb and everything during World War II, and kind of, maybe I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but you've got Oppenheimer as one of the main characters, and played by Cillian Murphy. I'm not gonna lie, that's one I'm hoping I get to see in theaters, because that's one that really intrigues me, because I think this is the first time that Christopher Nolan has done any type of historical biopic or any type of historical film. I mean, he's known for obviously the Dark Knight trilogy, and Memento, and Inception, and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how Oppenheimer turns out. But getting back to Armageddon, you've got such an eclectic group of characters, And these are not astronauts by any stretch. These are drillers. They have no military training, well, except for the one character, Chick Chapel. But aside from that, these are all guys who are very eccentric. And, okay. They finally get them all collected. They finally get them there to Houston, and Bruce Willis's character, Harry, gives them the rundown. And they all go, yeah, we're all going. And Steve Buscemi's character, Rockhound, he's like, I don't mean to sound like the materialistic weasel of the group, but he's like, do you think we'll get hazard paid for this? And okay, another one of my favorite moments, I think, from like the montage involving the drillers is when they're in with the shrink and everything, the psychologist or the psychiatrist, wherever he is. And Rockhound's in there with him. And he's sitting there and he solves like a Rubik's Cube in like a matter of minutes. He's like, what do you want to do? Compare brain pans? He's like, I got the Westinghouse prize at 12. Got my doctorate in 2 scientific fields. I can't remember which ones. yeah, Elysium. You damn right. The fact that not a single one passed a psychological exam proves that they are my kind of people. Mine too. And they give him the ink blot test, and he's like, this is a woman with small breasts. This is a woman with medium breasts. This is a woman with large breasts. And he's like, this one looks like you, the psychologist with breasts. But he's like, he taught at Princeton, one of the most well-regarded Ivy League schools in the country. And he's like, you want to know why I took this job? Because the pay is good, the scenery changes, and they let me play with explosives. And he's the one that goes nuts, the one that's the most educated, the one that's the smartest. He's the one that ends up going nuts. He starts using that remote control Gatling gun on the asteroid while they're trying to drill the damn hole. And what ends up happening, because he doesn't keep his eye on the damn transmission for the drill, Max or anything is in the drilling rig, the Armadillo, and gets blown out into outer space, all because Mr. Rockhound has a hard-on for the damn remote control Gatling gun. And you're like, you jackass. And Colonel Sharp is like, he's lost it. He's got space dementia. And they end up duct taping him into one of the chairs in the shuttle. And, well, I like the character of Rockhound. He ends up getting one of his own damn crew members killed. And he's like, okay, I would never do this. But the night before they are to go into space, Bruce Willis's character, Harry, is like, I want my guys off this base and have 12 hours, have the day off. And Sharp and Billy Bob Thornton's character, Truman, are like, we can't do that. It's too much of a security risk. And they're like, guys, these boys are about to snap. This could be very well be their last night on Earth. Don't you think they deserve a night off, a night to blow off some steam and, get ready for this whole thing? And what does Rockhound do? He goes and takes out $100,000 loan from a loan shark. And then they all go to, well, what I would consider a very high-end gentleman's club. And he says, I end up spending $10,000 on a stripper named Molly Mounds. And then he ends up, after they make it back from the asteroid and makes it back from the mission, the stripper's waiting for him. And he's like, I want to have babies with you. And I'm like, oh, good grief. And that's what I'm talking about with Armageddon. They're in this life and death situation, yet there's humor in it. Whereas with um, Deep Impact, there is the whole situation is seeming is almost entirely bereft of humor, which isn't a bad move by any stretch because it fits the tone of the movie. Whereas Armageddon, how these characters behave fits the tone of this movie. So, and that's just one example of me. I mean, you've got AJ and Grace, Ben Affleck's character, and Liv Tyler's character. And for those of you who might be wondering, who's Liv Tyler besides the actress who played Arwen from Lord of the Rings? Well, Liv Tyler comes from a very interesting. I don't think this is a wrong term to say, but from a very interesting pedigree, because she is the daughter of the lead singer of Aerosmith. Yes, she is Steve Tyler's daughter. And she actually got her start in acting in a couple of Aerosmith's music videos. And she acted alongside another, well, how do I want to qualify this? She acted alongside another bombshell, I guess is as good an adjective as any of the 1990s, and of course that is Alicia Silverstone. They were in, I think, one or two videos. The one that I remember the best is one called Crazy. And I think it's Liv Tyler who does a clothes on but down to her underwear strip tease in that video. And I'm like, Steve, are you really comfortable with your daughter doing this in a music video for your band? I mean, obviously, I doubt if he was actually there when they were filming it or anything, but still. But yeah, Liv Tyler got her start as a music video girl, and then she graduated up to Armageddon, and then eventually she did the Lord of the Rings movies, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And then for some oddball reason, she did Jersey Girl, which I've never seen, but I may eventually see. I think because it's one of the few Kevin Smith, Kevin Smith movies that I've never seen. But Armageddon, for all its goofiness, and yes, there is quite a bit. And yes, I'll talk about a few more of my favorite moments in this movie. As silly in tone as it is at times, when it wants to be serious, it gets serious. Now, two other characters that I appreciate a great deal is Dr. Ronald Quincy, played by Chris Isaacs, and he's one of as Billy Bob Thornton's character Truman describes him, he's practically the smartest man on the planet. Oh, and yeah, the other character is Keith David, who plays one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the president. And I love this scene because they're sitting around trying to figure out how to destroy the meteor, destroy the asteroid. And Quincy just absolutely owns this. I think he's like a 3 or 4 star general. Elysium, I can't say that's necessarily an unreasonable that's not an unreasonable reaction. I may feel the exact same way, but at the same time, it is what it is. But Quincy is sitting there across the table from Keith David, this very intimidating, very deep baritone voice general, and he's like, imagine putting a firecracker in your hand. Leave your hand open. What's going to happen? Your hand gets burnt. You take that same firecracker, wrap your hand around it, and set it off. What's going to happen? Your wife's going to be opening your ketchup jars for the rest of your life. And that's pretty much how they explain how they're going to destroy the asteroid. Is they're going to drill, drop the nuke in that hole, and then blow it up. And as much as Chris Isaac sometimes plays an ass in some movies, particularly The Patriot, I think when he plays Tavington, in this movie, granted he only has like one or two scenes. He absolutely owns those scenes, as does Keith David and everything, because he has more scenes in the movie. But Keith David, a personal favorite character actor, and because he's done some of my all time favorite movies. I mean, obviously he did this one, Armageddon. He did for Pete's sakes, The Thing, with Kurt Russell, directed by John Carpenter. Love that damn movie. I need to watch that later. But you've got Owen Wilson in this thing, and he plays a character by the name of Oscar. I don't remember the character's last name, but I think it's him and AJ who are talking about who they might be in the situation if they said in Star Wars. And he's like, who would I be? And I think AJ says, I'd be Han, you'd be Chewie. And he's like, Chewie? Have you ever seen Star Wars? I would think to myself, yep, that too. Elysium. Yeah, I had forgotten about that. He was Draco Malfoy's dad, Lucius Malfoy. He could just he could have used magic to deflect the asteroid and did nothing. He was the real villain. Well, technically, okay. Here's the thing. This is one thing. This is one issue I have with this movie and everything, because there's a part and everything where the astronauts and the drillers are up on the asteroid, and they're getting all in a tizzy because they feel like they're going to lose the ability to detonate the nuke, and the drillers have hit all sorts of roadblocks and everything, and they've got this stupid, absolutely nonsensical schedule for what depths they're supposed to be at and what particular times. And when the miners haven't hit, or the drillers haven't hit these marks, they're like, well, we've got to do this now. And they introduced the idea that the president's like, well, screw it. We're just going to put the nuke or anything down wherever it is and just blow it that way instead of, following along with the plan. And you've got this whole conflict between the miners and Colonel Sharp. And you got the situation where they activate the nuke and anything remotely from Houston. And then you've got these military, you've got these soldiers coming in with the nuclear codes and the football, as it's called, and everything. And I'm sorry, the situation was tense enough with them just trying to drill the damn hole and having all the issues that they had. You didn't need the added, and honestly, I think unnecessary addition of another conflict with the military butting in and going, well, we're just going to do things this way instead of following the plan that we came up with in the first damn place, or that us and NASA came up with in the first damn place. I'm sorry. That to me, that was just that was a bit of drama that just wasn't needed. And that for me is like my one real critique of Armageddon. They could have kept it focused on the miners trying to get the damn drill hold without having the military get involved or anything and trying to screw things up and trying to screw up the whole damn plan that they came up with in the first damn place. That for me was just completely unnecessary. And everything when they could have kept attention focused on them on the asteroid doing what doing what they were doing. And everything it just kind of for me it kind of spoiled the momentum of the movie. And everything, but then they finally got it back on track and everything. Harry comes in and he's like, Houston, you have a problem. He's like, I told my daughter I was coming home. So he's like, why don't you leave us alone, quit screwing around with this damn nuke, and let us do our damn job? And that pretty much shuts up the general and, well, seemingly the president, and lets them get back to work. Anything, and then they have the setback of the having the gas blowout and the armadillo that Max was in getting launched into space. Everything. Another part and everything is obviously when the two shuttles are trying to land on the asteroid, and the one with AJ and his crew gets damaged and ultimately crashes, and practically the entire crew dies except for AJ, Bear, and Lev, the Russian cosmonaut. And they all get in the armadillo, and AJ admits to Lev that neither him nor Bear are astronauts; they're oil drillers. And he's like, "You're not even." He's like, "You're not even astronauts," and they're like, "No." And they get to this big chasm, this big canyon on the asteroid, and AJ just chucks a rock up into space, and he gets the idea of jumping the canyon. And he asks Lev, have you ever heard of Evel Knievel? And Lev was like, no, I never saw Star Wars. I'm sorry, I chuckle. As many times as I've watched this movie, I still chuckle at that damn line because Lev doesn't realize that Evel Knievel is not a character from Star Wars. He was a stunt driver back in the day. One of the most well-known in the world and everything. If you don't know who Evel Knievel is, Google him. Look him up on YouTube. Whatever. And that man was, but they're in the situation. They jump the canyon, but unfortunately the thrusters that allows them to stay grounded on the asteroid malfunction. And Lev is like, I'm going outside. And he's like, you're what? He's like, I am the only trained certified astronaut, and I'm going to save your American ass. Granted, that's not a very good Russian accent, but it works. And he ends up succeeding, and they land, and they finally get to Harry and all of them. And one of the command center operators and everything goes to Grace and everything, and he's like, "Your boyfriend's back." And Truman asks her, do you think they can drill 250 feet in like an hour? And she's like, they damn well better. Now, I will say, there's another moment in this movie that I did not particularly care for, and it's when they're leaving to go into space or anything to go destroy the asteroid. So. Yeah, anything. I'll get to my point here in just a minute. I'll bring up your comment here, Alicia. What I liked about Lev is he's just as much a nutcase as a driller, so the NASA psych exam were unnecessary after all. They were all equally crazy. Elysium, you are not wrong. Not wrong in any degree whatsoever. Granted, the the astronauts and the military people and everything were a lot more level-headed, which you needed, obviously. But yeah. Well, and even Truman said to the crew and everything of the Independence and the Freedom, the two shuttles that Harry and the rest of the crew is on, Lev has been up there on his own for like 11 months, so almost a year. so he might be a little off. And yeah, Lev is very, very off. But there was another moment, and this is just like a personal nitpick. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything to do with the story, but I just did not care for this moment. It's when they're leaving to get onto the shuttles, and Grace is walking out with AJ and the rest of them, and he starts singing "I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane," and the rest of the crew starts singing. I'm just like, I just, I don't know if it's the song or the fact that none of them can actually sing that well, but I just felt like that moment was completely unnecessary when they'd already had a really nice, touching goodbye and everything as it was. I didn't care for that moment, and I actually skipped over it and everything while I was watching it. I will say another really nice character plot line and everything is the character of Chick Chapel. And he's estranged from his ex-wife. They've had a son, but he's not allowed to see the son and everything because of whatever reason. Everything, apparently he may have had a gambling problem, or because he was in the military, or whatever the case may be, and she ended up leaving him and everything. But he ends up showing up to the house and everything where she's living, and he's trying to do right, and he's trying to explain to her what's going on, but not let everything out because he technically can't. I think because they're under their mission is highly classified. But he's like, I want you to give him something, and you don't have to tell him who it's from. You don't have to tell him anything. Just give this to him. He's like, I got something coming up, something kind of big, and you might actually be proud of me. And then when they're heading to the shuttles, and they've got the TV cameras there and the cable news stations and all of this and everything. They got CNN, and again, another cable news station before they went a little whoo. And the their son and everything is like, mommy, look, that salesman's on TV. And she looks at it, and she gathers him up and wraps her arms around him, and she's like, that man's not a salesman, that's your daddy. And the thing I really love is when they get back from the mission, they have the Thunderbirds, the United States, I think it's Air Force Thunderbirds, do a flyover, and they do the missing man formation for the ones that didn't make it back. But you see the son and Chick's ex-wife and everything come out from behind one of the emergency vehicles, and the son runs up to him, and Chick picks him up and hugs him, and she actually comes, the ex-wife and everything, comes up to him, and you get the impression that maybe now they can reconcile and they can be a family again. And that for me was a really nice, more serious moment. And it kind of hit the right beats and everything in that particular instance, because they tried to have a nice resolution, or some sort of resolution, for every character. And I really haven't talked about Bruce Willis's character that much, Harry Stamper. Here's a guy who is very much a self-made man. He talks about the fact that he's a third generation driller. Everything he learned from his dad, and everything his dad learned, well, he learned from his dad, and so on. And he's a very no nonsense guy, but he does have a sense of humor. He does have a big heart. He cares about his daughter, but he admits that he is an immature parent. And unfortunately, there's another instance where, in this case, it's also his wife, Liv's mother, and everything, who ends up leaving them. I guess because she just couldn't handle the life of being married to a oil driller, which it can be difficult and everything, to kind of give a little bit of context. My grandfather, he wasn't an oil driller, but he did work and everything in the oil industry, sort of. Not sort of. He helped transport and set up a lot of the old timey oil field derricks and the equipment and everything. And he was away from home a lot. He was away from my grandmother and my mom and my uncle and everything. And mom has told me that it was kind of hard on them, him being gone as much as he was and everything, because they wanted him around, but they understood he was doing what he needed to do to take care of the family and everything. So they didn't really necessarily hold it against him. But at the same time, I could understand, having a husband, talking about Harry's character, not my grandfather, who is emotionally immature, but also works in this very hazardous field of employment, but it's a very lucrative field of employment. So, and I'll bring up your comment here real quick, Elysium. Hang on. I feel very uncomfortable doing a review of these movies and calling the characters on CNN and MSNBC journalists, same as if we're any other news channel. Yeah, but here's the thing, Elysium. At least these characters and everything, especially more so in Deep Impact, not so much in Armageddon, they do present themselves as credible and reasonable journalists. Not like how they are nowadays, obviously. But for me, anyway, the relationship between Harry and Grace and Harry and AJ, for those anything who might not remember, AJ is in a relationship with Grace or anything, and he has the intention of asking her to marry him. We open and everything, or we finally transition to Harry and all of them on this oil rig out in the middle of the ocean. And a chick or anything comes to Harry and says, "Guess who ran drill number 2 last night?" And Harry's like, "AJ!" Like, he's pissed. And he comes into AJ's room, and you see these very feminine feet painted with red nail polish slip ever so discreetly back underneath the blanket. And Harry comes in there to chew out AJ and get an apology from AJ, and then he's like, "Wait a minute, you're apologizing to me way too quickly." He's like, "No, dude, I'm trying to be he's like, I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. I'm trying to be a better man." And Harry's just like, just hush it. And he has a golf club in hand, and he finds Grace's bra. And I just have to say, AJ, if you're sleeping with your boss's daughter, hide her underwear just a little bit better. Seriously, dude, save yourself some time. Definitely save yourself some trouble, and definitely save your neck. But it leads to this very somewhat comedic, but at the same time, it starts to get a little heavy. And Grace or anything, she's like, "Ace, you have a good night too, buddy. Get you some rest. And as always, good to see you." So, but Grace is, "Hi, Harry." He's like, "I've repeatedly asked you to call me Dad." She's like, "Sorry, Harry." And Harry tells AJ, "Stay right there. I'll be right back." And next thing we see Harry with a shotgun. And it turns into a chase around this old wig that ends up with AJ getting hit by a ricochet of some buckshot. But by the end of the movie, I'm now as older as Harry and no longer AJ. Here's the thing. If I was in Harry's position, would I be thrilled or would I be particularly happy that one of my employees is okay? Would it bother me if they were in a relationship? Not so much, no. Would I have an issue with them sleeping together? Most likely having sex on the old rig where we're working? Yeah, I would definitely have an issue with that. I'm not going to lie, because I would. And while I wouldn't react as irrationally as Harry does, and I definitely would not fire him, I might give him a good stern talking to. But as Harry admits, he is emotionally immature. And Grace is like, I understand that you were born with a natural immaturity, and I forgive you for that. And Harry's like, I might be an emotionally immature parent, but I'm still your boss. And she's like, okay, fine, I quit. He's like, no, you can't quit. I need you to keep working. And she's like, look, me and AJ have been seeing each other for 5 years, or 5 months, not 5 years, 5 months. And she's like, I was raised around roughnecks. I am how I am because I was raised around roughnecks. Kind of the same way that my mom and everything. Well, she was, she was kind of a tomboy and everything because she spent a lot of time around my granddad, her father, and everything. But at the same time, she was, a proper lady, a proper young lady, a proper young girl. Grace is how she is because of the environment that she was raised in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because she is a very self-assertive young woman. She has a good head on her shoulders. She knows what she wants out of life. She knows who she wants to spend her life with. And AJ's the same way. But I think the thing that we see throughout the course of this movie is AJ really mature. And everything. And granted, he's still kind of a wise ass. He's still kind of a smart ass and everything. When he finally shows up with the other armadillo and the other drilling arm so that they can finish drilling the hole. And Harry says, I just got 5 words to say to you. Damn glad to... Okay. Damn glad to see you, boy. Yeah, he says, damn glad to see you, boy. And AJ's like, that's 6 words. He's like, I hear you. And then he's like, they just kind of exchange a couple words and everything with one another. And he's like, here you gotta hold a drill. And he's like, yeah, it's down this way. But they hit another gas pocket, just like the same way what happened with the other driller. And AJ's like, Harry, trust me, we can get through this. Just give me a freaking chance. And Harry's like, okay, call it. And obviously they end up succeeding, but then comes the bad part. The nuke got damaged during a rock storm there on the surface of the asteroid, so somebody's gonna have to stay behind. They end up drawing straws. But Harry, Bruce Willis's character, he makes the heroic decision to be the one that stays behind. And he's like, it's your turn to take care of Grace. Y'all to take care of each other. He's like, I'm gonna do this. And AJ's begging him, don't do this. Don't be the one that stays behind. Let me do it. And Harry's like, no. It's your job to take care of Grace now. He's like, you've earned my trust. And I think that's honestly a really nice thing, a great conclusion to their character arc. And even Colonel Sharp, who feels like it was a mistake to bring the drillers on board in the first place, when they get back to Houston, and he sees AJ and Grace and everything there on the tarmac, and he's like, ma'am, Colonel Willie Sharp, United States Air Force. He's like, permission to shake the hand of the daughter of the bravest man I ever knew. I also think that was a great moment as well. But, this was in a lot of ways a coming of age story for both Grace and for AJ. And there are some comedic moments in here. There are a few semi-risque moments in everything in regards to the relationship between AJ and Grace and everything, but they were done for the most part tastefully. So, but obviously in the end, the asteroid gets destroyed. Most of the astronauts make it home. The others who didn't are remembered and everything. I will say one thing that was a little strange for me was when Harry sets off the nuke, is there's this really odd visual and everything of Harry and Grace and everything flashing back and forth like there's some sort of telepathic connection between the two of them. I know it doesn't last for very long, but that just seemed like a very odd visual to include and everything at the end of the movie when he's now him seeing, having a flashback or seeing Grace's life and everything from when she was a kid up until she gets to be an adult. That made sense. But that quick edit and everything of the two of them, like they have this psychic connection with one another, just seemed weird. But again, it's just a minor nitpick, if nothing else. But the whole training montage and everything, the whole psychoanalysis, and Truman, Billy Bob Thornton's character is like, can they physically survive the trip? And the doctor and everything, who was actually a character, the actor and everything who played the doctor, who makes the comment, I'm amazed they survived the tests, was actually played a character, Dr. Ansva, on also on ER. So we got two ER actors and everything in both of these movies. You got Dr. Weaver, you got Dr. Ansva. Everything, one in Deep Impact, one in Armageddon. But you've got the physical and chick and everything gets called back by one of the nurses, and chick says to the nurse or the doctor, or maybe it's a nurse practitioner, either way, and he's like, gee lady, I'm just here to drill, and she's like, gee, so am I. And as best as I can describe it, and I think this is about the best way I can describe it, she holds up an anal probe. She holds up a damn anal probe. And he's like, oh hell no, and starts running like all get out. And I can't say I wouldn't have a similar reaction myself. Because I would. Woman holds that up. I'm like, you're not putting that anywhere near me, much less anywhere in me. You're gonna have to have somebody a hell of a lot bigger than me to hold me down while you do it. Because I come out, that thing gets anywhere near my backside, I'm gonna start kicking like a Missouri mule. I would. No anal probe for me. No way. No, thank you. Mm-mm. But in all honesty, do Deep Impact and Armageddon, to kind of start lining this up, do Deep Impact and Armageddon, have they aged well? In terms of the special effects, especially with both of them getting a 4K upgrade or transfer, yes. Both these movies do have aged very well. Are they something that can be watched more than once? Yes. Because I think each time you can discover something just a little bit different in both movies. And I think that's the charm of them. Especially with Armageddon. Because Armageddon has a bit more charm than Deep Impact, but Deep Impact, I think, is a much more realistic and grounded narrative compared to Armageddon. But they both have their strengths. I mean, you have some really good performances. Nothing, like out of bounds spectacular, but both casts for both movies are very solid and everything. You don't necessarily have any bad performances. And, would I recommend both of these movies to somebody who's never seen them before? Yeah. Yeah, I would. I would definitely recommend both Armageddon and Deep Impact to somebody who is maybe a child of the 90s or maybe somebody who grew up after the 90s and wants an idea of what cinema was like, particularly the disaster movie genre of the 1990s. I would definitely recommend these and everything because they are entertaining. They are to varying degrees thought provoking, and they do have maybe at times a bit offbeat comedy balance, but at the same time they will give you a good laugh if you do care for the type of humor that is presented in Armageddon and even to a degree in Deep Impact. But to kind of score these, kind of talking, give them a ranking between scale of 1 to 10. I would have to give Deep Impact a slightly higher ranking than Armageddon, even though I love Armageddon. But to give Armageddon or give Deep Impact a ranking, I would give it maybe a 7.5 out of 10. Or maybe, maybe an 8 out of 10. Definitely an 8 out of 10. Because it does present the situation, I think, in a much more realistic light, and it does present an interesting angle and everything, or perspective in regards to the situation that's presented in the film. As for Armageddon, as much as I love Armageddon, and I do, and I would most definitely recommend it, there are a few issues with the movie that kind of detract a little bit from my enjoyment of the movie. But at the same time, it doesn't ruin my experience to any degree. I would have to give Armageddon a 7 out of 10. And I think, and y'all might be thinking, well, Master, you've watched Armageddon so many times. Why such a low score? It's because of the things I mentioned. The whole situation with the military getting involved and trying to set off the nuke before they've drilled the hole. That for me kind of took me out of the movie. The whole singing of leaving on a jet plane and everything between AJ and Grace and the rest of the crew, I didn't care for that. But aside from those 2 points, I stand by my ranking, a 7 out of 10. Still very enjoyable, still very well acted. Oh, and I do want to make one more remark. For those of you who may not have realized it, Michael Bay does in fact make a cameo appearance in this movie. He doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, he might have like 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, but early on in the movie, he does make an on-camera cameo and everything. And if you don't know where, I'm not going to say, because I want you to see if you can recognize him, because this is a younger Michael Bay, but still very recognizable. So, but as a teenager of the 90s, as a kid of the 80s, growing up in the 90s, the disaster film boom of those years and everything gave us some really, really entertaining films. I have to admit, it's nice to revisit these films and everything. And of course, this is just the beginning. Like I said, over the next few weeks and everything, we're going to be delving into 3 other films from the disaster genre and everything of the 1990s. Dante's Peak and Volcano. Be doing that as a double feature review as well, and of course, Twister. Unfortunately, there wasn't another film that really fit alongside Twister, so Twister will be a solo review or anything. But I will bring up Elysium's comment here real quick. While Deep Impact is more grounded and bare acted, probably deserves a higher rating. Armageddon is more rewatchable. The fact is, more fun memes. It can be watched anytime in any mood. Yep, Elysium. I wholeheartedly agree with that. With that comment there, buddy. But to kind of give you all an update on a few things. And to kind of wrap this stream up for the night. For those of you who may have not noticed or anything on my social medias in particular, I am taking the channel in a Elysium, yeah, absolutely. And I've kind of gone back and forth whether or not I want to do an Independence Day review, or if I even maybe want to do it as a watch along. I mean, yeah, Independence Day is absolutely, it fits in that disaster film genre. Even though it's a little bit more sci-fi, it's still a disaster. I still categorize it as a disaster movie. But to get back to my point that I was making, I'm taking the channel in a very different direction. You're going to be seeing more movie reviews, both live stream and upload, and I'm pretty much putting the commentary on the broader pop culture spectrum off to the side, because honestly, I want to focus on specifically cinema. I want to focus on film. And because I think there's a lot better opportunity for conversation, discussion, and at times even debate and everything going in that direction. Also, I want to give you all an update on a couple of things. Starting next month in July, I'm going to be starting a brand new review series and everything on a favorite TV series of mine. This is one I've mentioned several times and everything. And now that Babylon 5 has been completed and everything, at least from my end of things, I'm going to be delving into another favorite series of mine from the 1990s. Of course, it is one of my all-time favorites besides Babylon 5, and that's of course Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we will be doing Buffy the same way that we did Babylon 5. It will be hopefully a weekly review series and everything, or at least bi-weekly. We will be going episode by episode and everything from season 1 all the way through season 7. But I do want to make a caveat here. I'll get to you in a minute, Zach. I do want to make a comment here. I do understand that a lot of people have issues with Joss Whedon because of his behavior and everything in the past on various movie projects. But I don't believe that the other people that were involved in the production and the creation of Buffy the Vampire Slayer should be marginalized or pushed aside because of the conduct of one person. So I will be disconnecting the art from the artist, and we will look at Buffy from the perspective of the show itself, not the behavior of the person who created it. So, but be on the lookout and everything. I'll be starting those reviews next month and everything, and I am looking for panelists that would be interested in doing a review on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've already got one party that is interested, but if anybody else would like to be involved in the Buffy Vampire Slayer review series, send me a DM on Twitter, on Instagram, and I'll put your name on the rosters. So, but I do want to say hello to my good friend or anything, one of many, Mr. Zach Leary. Or anything, he's coming in here a little bit late, but not gonna hold it against him. The ingredients: schlock, comedy, sacrifice, heroism, nationalism, a happy ending. Yeah, those are true. Everything that's very true of the disaster movie genre, both of the past and of currently. So, and he's like, generally for the genre. Yeah, I mean, and none of those things are inherently bad. Anything, if you have a good cast and a good crew, all of those things can work together really well. So, but anyways, folks, that's going to be the review for this evening. I want to thank y'all for tuning in tonight. And of course, anything, once this thing is done processing, uploading on YouTube or anything, you catch us on the replay, leave your comments down below and let me know what you think about Armageddon and Deep Impact. Like I said, in a week or so, I'm going to be doing another installment in this. Everything we'll be covering Dante's, I think it's either Dante's Peak and Volcano or Twister or anything, but I'll be keeping you all updated on my social media accounts, so keep an eye on both of those. But with all that being said, thank you all for being here tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, signing off.
Let's be friends.
Have you not?